Hello. Hi. So we're going to start relatively on time. I want to make sure that we're respectful of everybody's time, especially our alumni that are dedicating time to organize this event. Our DIS Alumni Network has done all of the heavy lifting to make today a success. So a huge, huge thank you to all of you for joining us. We are also in the Sage 2211, the DIS Design Studio. Let me show you guys very quickly. I will switch permanently to this camera in a second, but this is our current setup. So we have students, if you guys want to wave to our buddy camera over here. We're all really, really excited to have a bunch of wonderful wonderful alumni join us today. Let me switch the camera back to me so that I can do some quick introductions. So my name is Raquel Veliu. I'm associate professor in the Department of Science and Technology Studies, which is the home to the Design, Innovation, and Society program, a program I have been very heavily involved with for the past 8 years. It is, I like to joke, a design agnostic program. We largely focus on product and industrial design work, but draw inspiration from user-centered and human-centered design. So all of our projects are very concerned with the place that design occupies in society and the interactions that society has with technology and science and medicine and the ways in which that must shape our design practices daily. We've had incredibly successful alumni out in the world, and today we get to really highlight the diversity of jobs that our students go out into. And I'm really excited that they were open to letting this also be an accepted students kind of celebration and invite some accepted students to learn about what you can do with this degree after the fact. And of course, to our likely very anxious soon to graduate students in the classroom, they get the wonderful opportunity to ask some of the hard, direct questions of what life after graduation actually can and maybe should look like. So I think that's a lot of speaking from me. If people have questions directly from me afterwards, please feel free to ask them. But I actually want to hand things off to Fiona Clark, who has been really shepherding so much of this organization.
Thank you, Raquel. And hi, everyone. Nice to meet you in the classroom and online. As Raquel mentioned, I have sort of been helping in this effort since I was a student at RPI. I think we kicked it off with a fellow alumni, Nampuna, back in my sophomore year in 2021. And so I'm excited to be back here and moderating this panel. We've been working closely with George and Izzy, who are also panelists, to gather all the alumni that you see on the board here. I will hand it off to each of the alumni, but I just want to say thank you guys for participating and joining us. Just to give you an overview of like what the program will be like, I'll sort of kick it off with some questions, allow the panelists to intro themselves, and then we'll really tailor it over to like an AMA format. We want this to be an opportunity for both current students going off into the workforce and also students maybe perhaps considering DIS as a pathway when they go to RPI. Any questions that they would have for alumni on their experiences in the RPI and also at work. So I'm going to go in a bit of a random order, I think, of how you guys show up on my screen. I'll hand it over to Roham first. If you guys can just introduce briefly where you are, maybe like what you're doing, what you're briefly on your work experiences, and also what you studied in conjunction with DIS at RPI.
Cool. Yeah, sounds good. So I'm Roham. At RPI, I was a Information Technology and Web Science ITWS dual with DIS. I graduated in 2023, so it's been a couple of years now. Work experience-wise, I have extensive like healthcare software experience, both at J&J, Johnson & Johnson, and also at Epic, which is the largest medical record software company in the world. For my next thing, I'm planning on going to an international joint master's graduate school program. It's pretty amazing. I'll get to study human vision and how we work with machines and AI in like a 3D space. And the program itself, in a couple of months, I'll start in Finland, and then throughout my studies, I'll move on to France, Belgium, and then Japan. I also got very lucky and I got an Erasmus Mundus scholarship, which means that the EU is fully funding my experience. So I won't have to pay anything. That's it for me.
Awesome. Thanks, Roham. And yes, the added benefit of gathering all the alumni here, I've got to hear all the cool things that people are doing. So if you guys have any questions specific about each panelist experience, also save those for right after this intro. Lucas, I'll hand it off to you. I know you also have some international experience to talk on.
Yeah, hey, I'm Lucas. I graduated in 2014. I was a DIS and MEC-E dual. I transferred majors, I think 5 times while I was at RPI. Loved DIS, didn't really know what else I wanted to do at RPI. I bounced between computer science, animation, management, but came back to me because I really wanted to build things. I'm a design engineer, is really the role that I went to right after school. And since I started a product development shop with a business partner, the team is split between New York and Hong Kong, where we actually design, engineer, and manufacture products for other brands. That business is called Doris Dev. And then we built an in-house brand called Canopy. And then for the last 3 years now, I've been the CEO of that business and really running the product design and development teams there. Yeah, welcome. DIS is great. Love DIS. Something that I will say, one of the best parts about it that I felt for me was that it is just like this blank slate. It is 4 hours or 8 hours a week or like whatever it is of like teachers very loosely guiding you. And you really get in, you get out what you put into it. And so it's a really great opportunity to like lie, cheat, steal your way into getting credit for something that you're like really excited about and want to learn, and can fail along the way. So I think that was the really great part of the program for me, and having peers alongside you to like learn from, fail with, was the best part about it for me.
Thanks, Lucas. I can resonate very, very heavily with the failure part. I think, that's something that probably a lot of folks in the senior project are maybe experienced to get to the end of the path here. But it's really nice to sort of be in that environment where you can fail and also just keep sort of trying different things. Sonia, I'll hand it over to you, I think, to give your intro.
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. My name is Sonia Heldman. I graduated in 2022 for my undergrad at RPI. I did a dual degree in DIS as well as biomedical engineering. And I then did my MBA master's at RPI through the life science entrepreneurship focus that they have. I currently work in new product development for a medical device manufacturer. My pitch to people when I meet them on the street is that I design novel operative techniques for trauma surgeons. So essentially, I sit as the bridge between trauma surgeons who have ideas about the future of medicine and what they want to see in the OR, as well as a great team of engineers who are working on fundamental technologies, and we kind of bring those together to envision the future of surgery. In terms of the DIS program, I would heavily, just to kind of bounce off what people have said before, I would heavily encourage, one of the best decisions I've made for my career. And you really can position yourself in the market and differentiate yourself from other people who are maybe applying for the same jobs based on the experience that you have, the hands-on experience that you have is really, really valuable.
Thank you, Sonia. And yes, I'd have to agree. I am a PM myself, and a lot of sort of the studio and design work that we sort of learned in DIS has helped me a lot. And I will hand it over to Izzy. I know Izzy also has bounced around quite a different industries and a lot of different experience there.
Yeah, thanks, Fiona. Hi, everyone. I'm Izzy Kane. After I graduated, well, I guess I'll start with my dual. I was a dual with DIS and business management and graduated in 2018 from RPI. And right after I graduated, I joined IBM as a UX UI designer. And shortly after doing that, pivoted into service design, which is, I guess, a more strategic role of the user experience design and design research. And I currently practice service design at a very, very small firm called Mo Design Studios, where we do consulting for federal government. So I currently work on a contract for the Veterans Affairs, which is super interesting work and doing more technology side of things. So working on cloud services for people at the VA to use different cloud platforms and to share data and information with one another. So pretty tech heavy, but love the work that I do and loved the opportunity that DIS gave me to have a dual major with business management. I knew I loved design from the minute I took my very first DIS studio class and knew I wanted to do that as my career, but it was so great to have my dual business to kind of position myself in the market and explain what design can do with a background in business and kind of position yourself that way. So really grateful for the opportunity it gave me and super excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, Izzy. And Danica is joining us from, I believe, across the states in the Bay Area. Hello, Bay.
Yeah, I'll say good morning. It's still morning here. Nice to see everybody. I'm Danica. I graduated, maybe we'll date everybody. I graduated like the second or third year PDI existed, originally known as, in 2005. So I've been working in industry for just about 20 years. I worked at a school, this is maybe old school. I went straight into mechanical engineering. I worked in aerospace for a few years. I missed my product design time at RPI. It was so inspirational for me that I went on to do my master's in product design at Stanford. So I moved to the Bay Area and I've been here ever since. I'm a user experience researcher now. I think the DIS kind of mode of like, how does technology impact people weighed a lot on me. I care a lot about the things that I design and the things that go out into the world and if they make an impact in the way that we need them to. So I leveraged a lot of the kind of multidisciplinary education we got to transfer my hard, engineering, measuring stuff and objects and trying to make sure they worked well and transferring that to people. And I worked at AT&T. I worked at Google. I had a long stint at Waymo during the early days when they were putting people in self-driving cars for the first time. If you guys haven't seen them around, they're pretty cool. They've gotten a long way since I left there, but that was a really interesting time in my life. If you guys want to talk about thinking really strongly about technology that you build and whether or not it's going to have an impact in the way you want it to and the challenges of working in that, but also the benefits. And now I'm a manager. So I lead design and research teams. So if you guys are thinking about getting hired and you're interviewing, I can also give feedback on that because that's something that's a big piece of my job today. Yeah, so that's kind of my background. I loved RPI. I know somebody mentioned I worked with a lot of different engineers and designers over the years, and I thought that the kids and the students from RPI, we always had a better education. We always had a better foundation. I think they take the fundamentals more seriously. Again, when I was working as mechanical engineering, nobody knew the things that I knew. I didn't realize that until I got out and met kids from other colleges. So I'm grateful for the multidisciplinary education. I'm grateful for the hard, strong engineering background that we got there too. And yeah, it's been an awesome time. So anyway, happy to give feedback on any of those things if you guys have questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Danica. And I also just see some questions coming in on WebEx. If anyone has questions, feel free to put them in there and I'll queue them up once we switch over to the AMA section. I think we just have one more alumni. I think I see George in the classroom there. If George wants to go ahead and introduce himself.
Can you guys hear me online?
We can hear you, yep.
Well, hello to those online. Hi to everyone in person. I'm George Rizos. I graduated just this past year, class 25, with my master's in aero through the co-term program after I got a dual MECI DIS undergrad degree with a minor in graphic design. Came in class of 24 as a freshman, just declaring mechanical, and then took Studio One as part of the pathway, fell in love with it, and kind of stuck to it for the whole 4 years of undergrad. Learned honestly a lot more, in my opinion, than in some of my other classes and other programs at RPI. But I think the DIS program was super huge in terms of helping me shape how I think about engineering, because it's not just, okay, it's the shortest answer or the fastest answer or the thing that the computer says is right. It's a lot about, interacting with stakeholders and understanding why you're doing the things you're doing. And that's something I've seen in my day-to-day work. So I graduated last year, had a temp job as a quality engineer at Aptar Pharma, working on primary packaging and pharmaceuticals. If you've seen the little plastic Narcan canisters, our company made the plastic for it. And then just recently started a job across the river in Voorheesville at Atlas Copco. We make ginormous compressors about the size of this room. They're very big, but it's a ton of fun. And it's been an experience that I would never trade for the world with DIS. So yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, George. All right, so that's everyone on our panel. I know you guys all sort of touched on a little bit how you found DIS, how it's helped you in your careers. I'm gonna sort of take us back to like when we were at RPI, first exploring DIS, give maybe everyone in the room a little bit of an idea of what your life was like as a student, and then I'll transition us over to like the work life, and then I'll open it up for AMA. So I'll just sort of kick us off with a question anyone can answer. The first question I'd sort of pose to you guys is maybe how did you find out about DIS? How did you know that you wanted to commit to it? And maybe are there any other extracurriculars at RPI that you were involved in? I know things have changed names over the years, so maybe just explaining what they were and what they are, and the students sort of can get to know you.
I can hop on the train first.
Awesome.
For me, I found DIS through the Pathway program at first. Took the first studio class my freshman fall. I actually had to email Raquel, I believe, before I even got here to get let into the course. But found it that way and then kind of stuck to it ever since that moment. I know it's technically a program that's designed to be finished in 3 years, so you don't have to pick it up until your sophomore year, if I'm not mistaken, if that's still the case. Okay, it still is. So it's something you don't necessarily have to start your freshman fall, but I know it's a lot easier if you do. I know for me, having taken the studio my freshman fall made kind of scheduling a lot easier, but that's just down to the nitty gritty.
Thanks, George. I also found DIS sort of through my sophomore year, and Raquel was a close contact to get through that quickly. Anyone else want to share how they sort of found DIS? Or
I think one thing that I think one of the things that I had just in common with the other PDI students when we started was that a lot of us were those kids in school that were really good at math and science, but also loved arts and kind of theater and stuff like that. We were like the sillier storytellers. We were the more creatives. My two best friends here in the Bay Area are still my friends from RPI that I was in the product design program with. So we've stayed really close over the years. Because I think we had a really, again, it's a small class. You get really intimate with each other. You test each other's ideas. You help each other with things they're working on. So I think I uncovered, again, I think someone handed me a piece of paper in like an intro class. And I was like, I don't know, that sounds interesting. And the rest was kind of history. But again, like the first time you took your first studio, it either resonates with you and you're like, I think this is fun, like this ambiguity, or you don't. So if that's a skill, and I think that's something that we should brag about, that someone can drop you a pamphlet and say, here's like 3 lines on a topic and you can take that, learn enough about it and run with it. So yeah, that's why I think it resonated with me. And I loved RPI. Obviously, as I mentioned, I made some of my best friends. I played rugby, also was really fun. I lived off campus on like 14th Street. Is that true? So anyway, I loved my time there.
Awesome. Thanks, Danica. Yes, I think like balancing any sport and DIS is like a talent. I know there's many sleepless nights sometimes, so it's a hats off to you. Izzy, Sonia, Lucas, anyone want to touch on that or just move on to the next?
Yeah, I can. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, pretty much just echoing what the others said as well. I joined as an ITWS student in the beginning. I actually really love ITWS. I think it was a really cool technical way to like go through problems and like website building. But I think early on in like high school and before, I was like super interested in graphic design for whatever reason. Started to like it less, but then still wanted like a creative outlet that was like interdisciplinary. Somehow found DIS. I think mostly through teachers that also seemed interesting. And then started DIS in my sophomore year. For extracurriculars, I was like a student leader for Design for America for a number of years, DFA. That was super fun. Basically, it was like a student club that was like design oriented. We would use the human-centered design process to basically try to create like impact and small like localized change in our communities, like especially in Troy. So yeah, but those were good times. And I agree, like DIS people and alumni and the people that I was in the program with, I think it's like super rare to find that sense of community. And it's something that continues to stick. Like even if I like message any of my friends, even if I'm not talking to them, every day, I feel like a very close sense of connection with them. And I think alumni as well are super, super an amazing resource for you. And every alumni person I've ever reached out to from DIS has gone like above and beyond in terms of like helping me understand and answering my questions and things. So I'd recommend the same.
So, I'm gonna steer us over into a little bit more like maybe like what you guys did in DIS, and then I'm gonna open it up for the AMA portion. I don't know if you guys recall any of your projects or had a favorite project, but maybe you guys, I think everyone had quite a mixed bag of duals and also sort of other sort of minors as well and interests. I think it's always really interesting to see how people convert what they're studying and mix in their like passions and interests and also like the main core problem statement. I think I remember one that sticks out to me and I still see things around that like remind me of it. We were given like an artist and then like a sort of like a furniture piece and it was like I think animal like I don't know, I think like hardware. And now whenever I see like a goose like sink, I'm like thinking of it. So just wondering if you guys have any funny like stories or really like projects that like took off or anything like that you want to share with everyone here.
I have one that I would love to share. So actually, Roham and I did this project together. So feel free to jump in if you remember something that I forget. But we studied Eileen Gray, who's a famous architect that I'm sure you guys you might be aware of, you might not be. I see a lot of inspiration from her work in maybe like an Urban Outfitters chair, something like that. And of course, her work is still sold on the market as well. But we did a coffee cup based on that and a tea strainer, and it was a good project. I remember like we did the mood board together and the sketches, and I still have all of those sketches. I would say hold on to that stuff if you can. It's so good to look back at your work, to look back at what you designed. I was always trying to find ways to work in medical stuff as much as possible. That one, but Raham, did you have anything to add on that one or any like
Yeah,
insights? I don't know
think
if
one of
I'm
the
gonna
novel
share them
things
about
that
this early.
I was proud of from that project was like we were trying to think about like loose leaf tea and how you like have an experience where you don't have like the loose leaves like still in your tea while you're drinking it. So basically like we had a spoon that had like a net like ball kind of like embedded inside where you can just put all of your tea leaves in there and then just take it out once you're done mixing. But,
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that. I think also I like and Sonia, the Urban Outfitters like example is like so fitting. Like I know I've seen the spoons that have these, and sometimes your ideas like really if you keep running with them out of DIS, I feel like could take off. And I feel like I do see them come to market. At least some things that I remember people working on in class. Does anyone else want to share some ideas?
I had a fun one through the program in Studio 2. It was, well, there were two actually. One was a ski and snowboard multi-tool. So it was myself and a couple other people that like to ski and snowboard. And we did just our whole project on making a multi-tool that was compact and functional and could be used with a glove and all these other parameters that you would never think of at face value. And it had all the bells and whistles. We talked to a bunch of stakeholders, spoke to ski patrollers, racers, like everybody, and went through the whole design process from A to Z. And that was really fun and honestly really rewarding in the sense that it was very translatable to actual industry in terms of the design process. And then the fun one was, I'm sure many of you in studio have heard of this one. It's a little infamous. I had Johnny Ive as my designer, and we had something that helps me swim was the theme. It's gotten a bit of a name. It's gotten coined I Drown. by Jim Malazito, who was the prof for studio at the time. But I basically designed a snorkel in the shape of an Apple Pencil because Johnny Ive was the designer for Apple. And then Jim pointed out to me that if you tried to use said snorkel, it would not help you. So it looked great, but it didn't function. So it was a whole test of like, okay, how do we bridge that gap between form and function? But it was a ton of fun and definitely one of my fondest memories of my time in DIS.
I was just going through my portfolio for this, like that's still up. I found it, and a project that I really loved was this like alarm clock that was, we laser cut it. It was like our experimentation with Arduino, and I think it really introduced me to Arduino at the time, and the laser cutter, and like all these prototyping methods that like became so instrumental in like building my portfolio later, and then getting into a product development studio where you just like, that's what you did. You were just like given a pile of wires and like, go fix it, go build a prototype. And I think that was like one of the most instrumental things in like building my portfolio, and then eventually getting to find a role that like really fit and executed on that skill set. And I think that's something that the program is really, really good at saying, it's giving you a problem and you having to figure out the solution and the skills to do it.
It's nothing but like the resourcefulness I think you walk away with. Like even George, you mentioned like going and talking to different instructors in the area. I know a lot of us like went around Troy and really got to know Troy businesses and like the community just because of the projects we'd have, and also got really close with the garbage and the scrap buckets all across campus to be able to make our prototypes. So those are definitely, I think, underrated skills that sometimes I forget that I once did that. And so like for keeping your stuff, I think it is really cool to like look back on, and sort of remind yourself like sort of like what's possible, like what you sort of are capable of. I think especially transitioning into corporate, you can really start to get, or like really anywhere into industries, you can start to get very sort of narrow like scope projects. And so it's really like leveraging your unique skill sets and like the talents you've sort of identified through DIS, I think is interesting. And it sort of ties to the question that we got online. I'm going to start like sort of transition us over to the AMA. So George and Luke's, I know, are in the classroom and can sort of help us from the in-person point of view, but I'll start with two online and then I'll hand it over to you guys. One was from someone here who asked, someone's, how does like your specific like experience, I guess, help you stand out to your compared to your coworkers who had maybe similar studies at very similar schools? And then maybe like to tag onto that, I'll ask a question to Danica. But just, does anyone want to speak about how they sort of have noticed maybe similarities, differences of their experiences for coworkers in their same industry? Maybe Danica, can you tell us? You've been working in the industry for many, many years, and then
Yeah.
I'll sort of send it to someone else.
Yeah, and again, this is like my pitch I tell people all the time is like, you have to have something that makes you special, right? And again, we're all unique people, but again, like there are so many. I open a job rec right now and I'll get 1,600 candidates in a week. I'll close down the rec, right? I'm like, what am I going to do with all these applications, right? Like we're overwhelmed on this side, and great portfolio. Again, you got 5 minutes of my brain time to get me to look at you. A fantastic prototype, a stellar insight. Somebody found something from observing people that really inspires me, that I go like, that's a fantastic observation. What did you design from it? What did you find out from that? Right? Like people, I really do like it. It's 5 minutes. But again, I tell you this, my pitch, I still use this pitch when I'm telling people about myself, is I come from an engineering background. I have a very strong sense of rigor and attention to detail. I use a scientific process every day in my life. I come up with hypotheses, I evaluate them, I test them. That's from RPI. And then I apply that to whatever I'm doing, whether that's with my kids, my research at work. Like I'm always kind of have that mindset. And that works for me. I think that stands out. That's a unique part of what we go from, kind of that RPI background that I leverage. And then the dual degree thing, I actually use the STS background a lot, that I have a lot of empathy. I was, I remember taking those classes and we worked on one project with students and they were kids, right? Like we went out to like a school in the neighborhood and we watched them and how they were learning. And I tell that story still, like, well, like, and they told this story and I was like, wow, like, how can I help these people, right? Like if I can showcase empathy, if I can showcase like that dual thinking of like, how can I impact a group of people to do what I want them to in a positive way? Those are things that have really worked with me that those stem back all the way back to my RPI days. And again, when I'm hiring, I'm looking for people who can shine in some way. It doesn't have to be the same way for everybody, but again, like you're trying to find something that lands with people.
Yeah, I'll jump on that as well. The like portfolio, I think truly is the most important thing, and like the best thing that you can get out of the program is really building a strong portfolio. And the goal of this is my take on this is one of the huge goals of the portfolio is to really show your excitement for the work and your technical understanding of like the thing you are doing in your portfolio, showing your prototyping skills, showing your process, showing your problem solving. It doesn't have to be a great idea. Like the idea can be totally dumb. You're oftentimes not judged on your idea as as you're getting hired, for your first job. You are like someone else's tool a lot of the time, which is, that's kind of fucked up, but I'll say that there. I think really looking at how can someone be really excited and really technically strong in the needs of the business, and a lot of time that is just like heads down, hands on keyboard and CAD, hands on prototype in real life, and then taking that information and communicating it really, really clearly to stakeholders is really hard, and a lot of times not taught in engineering as a whole. But I think has been very important, and from what I've seen, a huge part of the DIS program, at least for me.
Yeah, I can jump on this again as well. To the seniors in the room, if you do not have a portfolio, make one. And to the point that Danica made, if you do not like a project that you did, don't put it on there because you'll have to talk about it. And if you hate the project, the other person on the other side will know. That being said, to Lucas's point of communication, I find that being an engineer working in manufacturing engineering and being able to write at the level that I can, thanks in part to the DIS program and all of the design reports that I had to write, I'm already a step ahead of a lot of other engineers that are just coming straight out of school. I also find that level of technical rigor, which I think we've all touched on, but not just the technical nitty gritty of like, oh, okay, where's the moment on this force inertia plot? It's also down to okay, what is this person dealing with in the day-to-day? How can I make their life better, et cetera, et cetera. Even for me in manufacturing engineering, I'm using that to improve day-to-day operations for operators. So a lot of the skills, if you're not necessarily going right into product design, even in engineering, are extremely transferable, and in my opinion, have made me a better engineer because of it.
Thanks, everyone. I have to ditto everyone's points here. I want to dig into a little bit more on like the empathy side of things. I think that's definitely something that makes you stand out. And yes, largely in part to a lot of the STS background that you get. And I know we have some accepted students on here and to break it down, STS is Science, Technology, and Society. And that is a separate department, but that's sort of like a sister, I guess. Raquel, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think sort of like a close partnership that we do throughout the DIS program to sort of do like more, I guess, like literature and critical thinking, and you sort of do a lot of writing that really like you're not really expected to know as like an engineer going into the industry. So I think that helps you stand out. Digging a little more into the empathy side of things, I think a good question that came up online, and then George, I'll hand it over to you guys maybe in the room, start thinking of some questions. We'll go back and forth here. But someone asked, how do you manage like the trade-offs between what's technically possible, like from an engineering perspective, but also making sure that what you're developing has a human center and component to it. Does anyone want to speak to it? I think Sonia, maybe you'd be a good one. I know you work in the medical industry, but I think this goes across all.
Yeah, of course. So I work in a highly emotional space. This is orthopedic trauma care. So many times a patient has undergone a motor vehicle accident or other severe trauma. And so the most important thing is that the tools work. Like they have to work and they have to perform in that setting. And so empathizing with a surgeon and understanding all of the things that could go wrong and what their main focuses are is really important. And so the ways that we're doing that is getting into the OR and like seeing how people operate and how they're thinking through problems and just kind of being like a fly on the wall in that scenario, asking critical questions to kind of jump off what other people had said about portfolio. For me, it wasn't necessarily a portfolio that people are looking for, based on my industry maybe, but the project work that I did in terms of trying to spin out a technology that I had developed at RPI and then getting a research grant and taking that and traveling to international conferences where I can go and interview surgeons and show my ability to draw a thread and write a thesis about how these people are thinking about the field, how these people are thinking about new technology. That's really what got me noticed, and got me recruited for my current role. And so I think that's another great way. If there's something that you're really passionate about, lean into it as hard as you can in your free time. That is going to pay you back in dividends, I promise. So.
And if no one else has anything to add to that, I'm gonna ask one more question because you mentioned a good point that comes up. I think a couple of people have asked online about managing all of sort of like the intensity of that RPI sort of brings, and also like your studies and sort of your life, right? You probably still do this in your careers, and I think that's like an ongoing thing that people have to figure out. Maybe if you just want to speak on that, and then George, I promise, on your way over to you.
Sure. So your question is just regarding time management. I would say, so I was also on the women's soccer team. That's kind of how I found out about DIS. Many of my teammates were in DIS. And so looking up to them and seeing, the projects that they were working on, I had done so many engineering camps in high school. And I thought that engineering would be more hands-on. And then you're doing Calc 1, Physics 1, and you're missing that hands-on element. So DIS was great for that. I always found that it was a break from my engineering work in some way where I get to use the other side of my brain. And so it didn't necessarily feel like more work. It felt like I was using both sides of my brain evenly. I would say in terms of like work-life balance, my goal in life is to, build a life where it's kind of difficult to distinguish between those things. I'm really passionate about what I do. So that's what motivates me. And then seeing the impact of your ideas come to life is so rewarding, and just keeping that in mind that there is a patient whose life is being affected by this, and being able to kind of match the level and the sacrifice that your customers might be making in order to maybe be a surgeon, and the fact that this is maybe this person's the worst day of their life. This is not something that they plan on doing. So keeping that in mind is extremely, it makes me a little bit emotional to talk about it even, just because it's what I feel like this program has given me the ability to bring this DIS perspective into that space where it might not have been there before, and just speak to, how are we changing these people's lives for the future, and where does that lead them? So thank you.
I'll also add on, when I was at RPI and taking DIS and having my dual between DIS and originally was mechanical engineering, but then I switched to business management because I fell out of love with engineering for a lot of the technical reasons that we've talked about. But I remembered when I was taking my dual courses that the amount of credits that I had to take for my two duals was only very slightly more than it was to just major in engineering, for example. So the course load really isn't that much more work for those prospective students. And it is a great balance between having more of a creative aspect versus your dual major. It's just so great to have that, and have like a good break in the day to have something creative to focus on. And to give you more context, I was involved in 4 extracurriculars outside of my dual major. So you can definitely have and do as much as you want. It's definitely as much as you put in is what you get out of it. So it's possible.
I'll throw in after you graduate as well. I think there's not a lot of work-life balance, like at least for the first few years after school as well, because you are getting thrown into an industry that, like, no matter how much you learned and how well you were educated, like you don't know anything about the job that you're going into and in the industry you're actually getting thrown into as, you know, a 22-year-old, you know, first, second, third year at these companies. So, you know, the dream of work-life balance throughout college and after is not necessarily true. Like it's really a dream, and like that's what Sundays are for a little bit. But besides that, like you're working your ass off until the end. Like I don't know, it doesn't stop. But especially those first few years, you're like really learning a lot on the job, and taking the, I think, work ethic that DIS kind of requires, because it's like it's project based. It's not really done until you're unable to work on it anymore. And I think that goes, you know, that transitions very well into your first few years in the workforce of like that's a case like you don't know what done is.
Like people can always, I know people always were working, I think, into the last minute in studio before turning in their projects. And I also was involved in a lot on campus. I think when I went into my career, I sort of like dialed it way back to like try and get used to the industry and like moving new places. So I think it's ebbs and flows, and really, like everyone said, it's up to you to sort of manage that. And if it's important to you, I think you can make the time. And everyone around sort of in the studio also, I think, is it's a good shoulder to like rely on sometimes to level set. I am going to hand it over to Luke's in the classroom to share if there's any questions from current seniors.
Yeah, for sure. So I have one ready. I haven't collected from people. So if people have questions, you know, obviously jump in. But I have one to kick us off. One of the ideas that I was explicitly taught early on from Raquel was the concept of killing your baby. And I wanted to ask you. Darling's baby. Okay. So I wanted to ask you guys if in your careers at whatever stage they're at, if you've had an experience where you had to kill your darling or your baby, whoever it was, and sort of what that looked like in a more professional context, and yeah, what that process was like, or if this is, you know, a completely foreign concept and your darlings are always awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in like on the product side for Canopy, there's a lot of products that I've wanted to work on that like have hit the cutting room floor. And I think, you know, one of the best, and personal projects and all that, I think one of the best ways that I've found to do it is like work on something till you don't want to work on it anymore. It like has this natural, you know, feeling, at least for me, like I'll work on something until I hit the end of saying like, I'm over this. Like I explored as much as I could. I actually don't like it anymore. I'm going to put it on the shelf. And then that happens. And then for ones that like probably deserve to die. And then the ones that like make it to the finish point and make it to market, like they generally deserve to get there because they were interesting enough. They were a real problem. Other people got excited by them. But I'll say, you know, one thing that happens very early in these early stages of an idea, the first like few weeks or months, it's really fragile. They're really easy to kill then, especially based on other people's feedback saying like, oh, they don't like that idea. I would say work on projects a little longer in that stage to see like, are those people right? Are they do they just not like the idea and they can't imagine it, or they don't see what you're seeing, and like get it far enough that you can see if you can get other people excited by it, and if you're still excited by it a month in, but afterwards, like be okay killing it. Find other things to do.
I mean, from the engineering side, also recent bias, because from the reminder, I graduated last year. A lot of it for me has been more on does a project get pushed from leadership, and then how do you kind of that baby and help it grow while also trying to make sure that all different stakeholders are happy with the solution you're coming up with. I know one thing I'm running into right now, I'm working with our paint department and trying to make process improvements because we're expanding our site by about 3 times. And a lot of the nitty gritty detail work is important, but then also pulling back, looking big picture at the whole darling and understanding, okay, how does this one piece fit into the bigger picture of all this? I mean, again, a lot of the DIS projects that you'll do or that you guys have done are very condensed time-wise. A lot of the projects are sprints, spare for senior project, which is in effect also a sprint, but relative to the other projects you've had, it probably feels like a breath of fresh air. A lot of it is working under pressure, being able to turn that darling around sometimes when you're given a pivot from upper management telling you, hey, we can't do this, we need to cut X amount of money from the project, figure it out. A lot of those hurdles that you all have jumped through in your DIS experience, kind of pivoting that experience to projects that are longer, more convoluted, where there's so many hands in the pot and heads in the kitchen. So it's a lot of transferable skills, but sometimes you do just have darling.
I think Jim's red marker was always feared on poster days, but I do think that once you can sort of accept it and move on and realize, I think also any feedback that you're getting in the studio and most of the times in like a career setting, you're really getting like out of like your best interest. Like people are trying to look out for you and like help you and guide you in the right direction. So I think like a little bit like the empathy side is like really like you know we sort of get teed up really heavily on the empathy side, but then also remembering to like a little bit like save the emotion and look at things from a logical perspective when you do get like sort of sent in a different direction is okay. We have another question online here. I just want to ask if there's any other questions in the room before. I think we have about 5 more minutes for questions, so I'm going to give you guys the time there. Go ahead, Emory.
Yeah. I heard a couple people talk about their master's education. And I was wondering, for those of you who have done a master's program in design, specifically like the Stanford program, or even still considering doing one later in your career, how did you choose that program and find out about programs? And how do you think it helped you if you already did it?
Yeah, I can share specifically about Stanford because I think it's, you know, I think actually there's a couple of other RPI kids, right, who've come out of the DIS program and come out as well. So I studied mechanical engineering, right? So I was working in aerospace and it was hard to pivot to design. I don't think I had a clear pathway. I don't think at the time, like I had the design background from RPI to do that. So Stanford was a way for me to go like, I'm going to do this product design program. It was so much like RPI. I don't think, again, I did the same projects. We were building cardboard furniture. We were designing artifacts in the way of designers. Like it was actually very similar. But it opened up a network, right? I don't know what you really learn in your master's in design. I'm going to be honest. Again, like you should know the basics, right? You should, at this time, you should know how to use Photoshop. You should be using CAD, right? Like all the tools were already there. Master's really opened up my mind about like, what do I want to do? What am I passionate about? What do I care about? How do I want to spend my days? I'm so glad I went. Not because I didn't learn something, but because I learned a lot about myself. If I didn't take those 2 years, I have no idea where I would have been. And on top of that, just like the RPI graduate ecosystem, the Stanford ecosystem is top notch, right? The Alumni Network is really special from the design program. I have a second group of design studio friends that are just like my RPI friends, some of my best friends in life, right? So it's not required. Again, as a hiring person, I'm not always looking for a master's, right? I hired this master's student recently from Cornell who is absolutely crushing it, right? He's a 10 out of 10. He's a total rock star. Is it his master's that made him that way? I'm not sure. He might just be that type of a person. So I don't know, keep it as like in your back pocket. I mean, I know some people here have already done theirs as well. Again, it was very transformational for me. But again, on a maybe different level than I think an undergraduate education that's like a foundational program is. A master's program, again, for me, it was really, really, really special. So that's how I ended up there. I picked Stanford. It was actually, I was going to RPI Extension in Hartford when I was working in aerospace, studying my mechanical engineering degree. And I talked to my professor from RPI, Jeff Hannigan. He was one of the early design professors. And he said, I don't know why you're getting your master's in engineering. You should be going to Stanford. So the teachers at RPI continued to push me for a few years after I graduated. Jeff and I are still really close. I think his recommendation letter is the reason I got in. Like, again, like he's like one of the most important people. I met him at RPI and through the program. So yeah, anyway, that's how I ended up at Stanford, and I'm really grateful for that opportunity.
Thanks, Danica. I know we're coming up on time, so I'm just going to open it up for one more person to answer, and then I'm just going to do a speed round of a couple of questions I've gotten here. Does anyone else want to add on to like their master's experience before I do that?
Yeah, just briefly, I'll try to be quick. But yeah, I was kind of going through the same mental process. To me, it sounded very similar, a lot of these design programs that I was looking at. And I'm kind of attracted by things that are really new and different and interdisciplinary, and something that would like flex me and push me in a different direction. So this program that I found is really special because it's like very much like up and coming. It's like in an emerging field that I think will be super important. And that's why I kind of chose it. Because it fits with my interests and is something new. Yeah, it's up to you. You don't have to have a master's, right? But it's a different kind of career trajectory overall, exposes you to more opportunities. And I'm also excited to learn different cultures and then move abroad as well.
That's awesome. Really quickly, I did a master's that concentrated on life sciences. It was an MBA, but this particular business has different patents. I know there was a question about patents too, has different patent laws, and going through the FDA in order to market a product is just a different life cycle. So if that's something, I don't know what type, if anybody's studying biomedical engineering as well, but that's just something to think about, is like, what is the standard in your industry of how are products actually brought to market in this particular industry? And that's why I chose that program.
Thanks, Sonia. And yes, I am really thankful that everyone's responses. I know there's probably a ton more questions. And I sort of like, I think Raquel, I'll sort of lean on you to help me gather some from the students in the room if there are any other questions. I think we're planning on doing these sort of sessions later on as well, and sort of continue the series going. I see that there are some questions more specific to like RPI's patent process. And so I think we also have some folks in from like RPI Direct Accepted Students Office. And so might lean on you guys to help answer some of those questions as well offline. Maybe just like to wrap us up here, I'll ask one person to give an answer about the Arch experience. I know that sort of fluctuated over time, so I'm not sure even if everyone was around when there was Arch, but if anyone has had a standout like Arch experience and how they use that, we can go there. And then one more question in the classroom.
Yeah, I can answer the Arch one. I think just because it's kind of built in that structure to have an open space to pursue something, it's actually super helpful. I got super lucky as well because J&J, Johnson & Johnson, has like a really, really strong RPI network. So I basically did an interview, got in, like met other RPI people, and then ended up extending that co-op experience. So then I had basically done 2 semesters worth at J&J for a full year. It was super handy. It was valuable. I think it did probably help me in the future too to get like my other medical type related experience. But yeah.
I might hop on this one as well real fast. For me, I did spring away. So I was on campus for 4 semesters in a row, and then took basically January 1st to August, when you start the semester in the fall again, to do internships. I had an internship from January to March where I worked as a manufacturing engineer doing composites and literally making stuff day to day. And then was fortunate enough to actually get an internship in NASCAR for the second half of that summer, from March until August when I came back. And having those varied experiences was super valuable because it taught me the parts of some jobs that I liked, the parts of other jobs that I didn't. It also opened a million doors for me. I have a massive network now that I can just reach out to people and be like, hey, are you guys running a race car this weekend? Do you need someone to hop in and help? Little things like that I don't think you would get if you have those kinds of varied experiences through the Arch program. So for me, it was valuable, but like you said.
Awesome. Thank you, George. I think I'll close it out. Raquel, do you want to go ahead and sign us off here?
I would love to. Let me just move things around. Sure. Our alumni network. So the way that this was organized, I was away on sabbatical and parental leave, and I emailed in January a group of alumni, and within 3 days, out of 10 people, I had 7 responses. And it's one of the most humbling experiences as an instructor to feel that people that move on still have this type of connection back, and are willing to spend an hour of their time doing this type of work during the day, during a work day. And not just that, but put in additional hours for organization meetings and want to be in touch. I think that says something really incredible about the community that we have built around us in DIS, that you have all helped us build. This is an encouragement for current students that are about to graduate to stay in touch. Consider maybe participating in the network in similar ways. I promised Fiona when she graduated that I would give her a gap year from RPI before reaching back out. And I did, and I'm hoping to continue that tradition. But if you feel like you miss us, reach out. You have my email. I'm also really grateful that you allowed this to be a thing for accepted students, for them to see the promise in this type of dual program that is a little bit weird and is a little bit about how much you put into it, because we are willing to help you figure out who you are in this classroom. So I'm just really humbled and grateful for all the work that everybody has done to put this event together. This will be available on YouTube after probably a couple of days for me to make some edits. I am putting my email in the chat as well. I will be undergraduate programs director for the Science and Technology Studies Department, which oversees this program. So if you're interested in joining this program, please just go ahead and drop an email to velur@rpi.edu. And as always, it's humbling and it's a pleasure. And thank you all for joining us today. And everybody in the studio, please join us in thanking our alumni.